Anticipating India, my latest book, uh, is actually a selection of some of the political columns I have written over the preceding 20 years. And it's not just a selection at random. These 20 years have seen India's politics change fundamentally. Congress has weakened and nearly disappeared from the scene nationally. We've moved into the era of coalitions. We've survived coalitions very well. We've learned to live with them, and now we again have a government with a full majority. So these articles and a long introduction, in fact, give you an overview not only of what has happened in that period, but frankly, and it's a pretentious thing for me to say, how the column that I write every week, National Interest, anticipated many of these changes. And again, on the basis of what we have seen, what is it that we anticipate going ahead? In fact, in the introduction to the book, the last lines was my anticipation, but frankly, more than anticipation, it was a wish, and it was that Mr. Modi going ahead will become more moderate, that Rahul Gandhi going ahead will become less shy and diffident, and Arvind Kejriwal going ahead will learn the value of establishmentarian calm. And I said any which way they will provide us, there will be a great cast of characters. So every Friday evening when I sit tired after a week's work figuring out what to write today, there will be no shortage of subjects. And I would say that until now, the verdict on this is very mixed, because I don't think each one has quite got where I had wished they should. I had not anticipated that they will, but I had wished, because certainly Mr. Kejriwal does not believe in mainstream calm, or he would not be fighting with the central government and his police commissioner and his LG every day. Certainly Rahul Gandhi has not given up his diffidence and shyness, and also in some ways lack of focus, or he would not be disappearing on so many long foreign holidays for so long. And Mr. Modi hasn't yet learned the value of moderation, because if he did, he would speak out a lot more on some of the incidents which have taken place. And certainly his police will not go and raid a campus just because some students shouted some stupid slogans, because slogans can't damage a country. So this is a work in progress, and that is the most fascinating thing about Indian politics. I love Indian politics and I love being a journalist in India only for this reason, because both Indian politicians and Indian society have the ability to constantly surprise you. So anticipating what's going to happen is always a fascinating challenge. You don't always call it right. When you call it right, you can celebrate it. But when you call it wrong, you know that people much cleverer than you and much more powerful, enormously more powerful than you, are deciding your destiny, not you. So sometimes you watch from the sidelines, sometimes you anticipate. The data is the lifeblood of journalism. In fact, I speak to you in the city of Narayan Murthy, not far from Infosys, and there is a line that Narayan Murthy once spoke to me, which I kept close to my heart and I quote it very often. And I think he also uses it very often. It's his favorite line. He says, "In God we trust, the rest of you bring data." So data is very important. And yes, you are right. I mean, to use data the right way is something you learn from experience. But there is no shortcut to reading, to listening to a lot of people. The problem is very often when people meet other people, they think it's an opportunity to give a lecture to the other person instead of listening to the other person. If you have the humility to believe, to accept that the other person knows more in his or her areas than you, and also the curiosity to know more about something, then you go back with data, and then because you are living your journalism all the time, you can use that data when you need to use it, and that data can be anything. It can even be in fact, if you read many of these articles in my book, many of them make references to popular culture or Hindi films. And mind you, I'm not an avid film watcher. I mean, I don't watch every film. I don't have a corner of my mind focused on Bollywood. But the films that I see, that I hear about, if they are interesting or if they are moments that stick to your mind, very often that come back and become relevant when you are writing something. One of the articles is actually based on Amir Khan's film. Amir Khan, I think Farhan Akhtar and Saif Ali Khan, Akshay Khanna, I think, one of the Khannas, Dil Chahta Hai, made by Farhan Akhtar. And it just occurred to me when I watched that film that it is perhaps the first time in Hindi cinema that a film unabashedly celebrates being rich. Because all three boys in that film are rich. They drive Ferraris, they drink champagne, so do their girlfriends. They dump boyfriends and girlfriends and carry on like that. It's a sort of breathless celebration of being rich. In a traditional Bollywood film, one of these boys would be the son of the maid servant in the house of one of the other two. And all three would go to his mother's little home for a meal and say, Auntie, जो आपके हाथ के खाने का मज़ा है, वो हमारे घर के खानसामे के खाने में कहाँ है? But that itself, the success of that film gave you a sense that India was now entering a growth phase, when Indian society had begun to enjoy growth, when Indians were no longer embarrassed or defensive about being rich. So data can come from anywhere. A journalist has to keep his eyes and ears and nose open, but also has to keep his or her mind open. Because if you think I know everything, then you become not a reporter or a thinker, you become a more evolved form called thoughter, which means I've thought everything through, but you are then of no use to anybody except yourself and maybe your mom, because moms love their children anyway. And whatever they do, all the rest will laugh at you. See, histories of nations is not written like a T20 match. They are test matches. So, they are session by session. And I would say the tenure of each government is like a session in a test match. So you can think of a country's fate 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 25 years from now, if each government's tenure is one session in a test match. So I think if you apply the law of averages and look at the way India has evolved and Indian society has evolved, it will remain a democratic country. I think India has a very bright future. There will be good quarters and bad quarters, but unlike the corporate sector and stock markets, destinies of nations are not determined on quarter tak basis, or what I sometimes call QSQT basis. You get some a net of all that happens over a period of time, and I think politics is very vibrant now, media is very vibrant, civil society is very vibrant, Indian corporate sector is growing, hopefully more jobs will be created in the next few years. And I do think that if we have this conversation 10 years later, we'll find a very different and a much better India.